Sexual assault and rape aren't everyday conversation, but you're starting to hear those words more and more, especially on college campuses. 1 in 5 women will be victim of sexual assault before she graduates college. Even President Obama has taken a stance to raise awareness on the issue. We spoke with one Elon student who believes it's a problem at Elon, and she knows from experience. Senior Kelsey O'Connell is a Lumen Scholar, a college fellow, and she's involved in multiple organizations on campus. But rather than loving her soon-to-be alma mater, she says she's afraid to walk to class.
I carry mace in my backpack. I keep my keys between my fingers.
O'Connell says she was raped while studying abroad in London in the spring of her sophomore year. She filed charges and came back to Elon before the trial. She told one of her best friends about the incident after a night out drinking that summer, and later that same night, she says he forced himself on her.
He tried to take my clothes off, and it was to the point where I had to dig my nails into his hands and pry him off of me.
Then she says he took her home. She didn't tell anyone until the next semester because of the trial going on in London.
And I was so upset because the rape is one thing, but he was my friend. He was someone that I trusted.
Then, in the beginning of her junior year, just a few months after the incident, she reported him to student conduct, and after a university hearing, he was suspended for a semester. He was allowed back on campus in February of 2013, but took another semester off after that.
I didn't think that he would ever come back.
At the beginning of her senior year, O'Connell heard he's back on campus.
And someone talked about seeing him at a party. And I knew that he had done the suspension, so I knew he could be back on campus. But they started talking about when he would graduate. And I thought, this can't be real. Elon would have told me. Elon would have made it clear that he was back.
O'Connell reached out to then Director of Student Conduct, Whitney Gregory. Gregory says there had been 3 confidential advocates in the past year who act as a resource for sexual violence. She responded to O'Connell's email saying it had been a breakdown in communication. What are you going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen to someone again?
Right. We've already looked into that process to make sure that there are very specific notes that are transferred from one confidential advocate to another to make sure that they know who has requested follow-up, specifically what follow-up have they requested.
O'Connell followed the university's protocol for reporting sexual assault. In Elon's case, the Honor Code lists 2 types of sexual violence: sexual harassment and non-consensual sexual acts/sexual misconduct. The Clery Act, created in 1990, requires universities to report any forcible and non-forcible sexual offense that is reported to the campus police every year. Because sexual misconduct is such a broad term, most of the sexual violence reported to campus is not required by law to be told to the student body. Jodine Schmiederer is the Associate Dean of Students for Leadership and the Honor Code at Elon. In many cases, she helps decide the punishments for those accused of sexual violence. Without using O'Connell's name, we described her situation to Schmiederer.
Is the university required to inform victims when their perpetrators are returning to campus after the suspension is over?
When one student is found responsible, the complainant is told the length of the suspension. From what date to what date is their suspension. So if they're only suspended for a year, for a semester, they would be told when the student was eligible to return.
But you don't call them and say, just so you know, this person has returned to campus or anything like that?
Not necessarily.
O'Connell says she first saw her perpetrator at Acorn and went home and had a panic attack. Schmiederer would not address any individual cases because of privacy rules.
From what you're saying, if they're not required to tell the person that the perpetrator is returning to campus, do you think that that's a good policy?
You stop.
She didn't ask to stop the interview because she didn't want to answer. It's because she can't. Her job prevents her from addressing specific cases. So we asked the same question to Dean of Student Life, Smith Jackson. Do you think that it's a good idea to allow perpetrators back on campus?
That's not a yes or no question.
Dr. Jackson says it depends on the severity of the case.
If there was a forced rape, if there was, it was someone who a survivor could not give consent, something like that, then no, I don't think a person should be allowed back on campus.
But student conduct isn't the only place to report an incident. If a victim wants to press criminal charges, he or she can go to the police.
It's something that happens every day.
Captain Vicki Molman has spent more than 20 years investigating sexual assault and violence on Elon's campus. Elon's internal judicial system has to make a decision within 60 days. A legal investigation and prosecution can sometimes take a year or more. So how do students decide which avenue to choose?
Each case is different, and it's up to the victim if they choose not to prosecute. If you're talking about a sexual assault, if the victim chooses not to prosecute, or the district attorney chooses not to prosecute, that's not up to me to say, that's not up to our department to say whether that's the best choice. It's the choice the victim made. And in my opinion, that's where the decision should lie.
Safety is a priority to O'Connell, and Gregory says there's no way to know how to make every single victim feel secure.
For me, I would say that it would be presumptive for me to suggest something to her. I would outline all of the different resources and all of the different processes, but I would want to know what is it specifically that's making her feel unsafe. And if there's a conversation to be had about the sanctioning process as a whole, I think that's something for students and faculty and staff to have that conversation together.
O'Connell knows there isn't much the university can do for her now that she's graduating, but she hopes that by speaking out, she might help change the system.
I'm tired of them treating us like we are equals. We're not. You don't take away someone's rights and then get the same rights as the other person. I don't think they should let people who commit sexual assault, who commit rape, shouldn't let them graduate alongside the people that they've harmed. I don't think that they should be let back at school. I think it's insane that someone can be expelled for cheating on a test, but when someone violates me physically, they're gone for a semester.